the Greg and Leisa Show.
I'm Greg, and I lived through the short. I am still here.
It's Lisa. Thanks for joining us tonight for our new topic, which is aging parents. What do you do as your parents begin to age, Greg?
My parents are still so active, and they barely started to seem old until last year, and I mean that respectfully. I can't think of another way to put it. So I'm still figuring out what to do.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this topic will give you some insight. So if not for your parents, for me, because I am an aging parent.
We all got a lot to learn here, everybody, so buckle up.
That's right. So, aging parents, they want to live independently as long as possible. And, that pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. But prior generations have always wanted to die at home, and their home was always their castle. But their domain, do you think that has anything to do with being growing up in the Depression era? Why they wanted to, they're so clingy to their house that's where, they want to live, and that's where they want to stay.
Absolutely. You don't want to lose that at any cost, especially after you've been through, something such as the Depression.
Yeah. Well, I watched my mom take care of my grandma a lot of her life until my one brother moved in and helped take care of her. And my grandma passed away at home, but my mom and dad lived at home as long as they could. And they didn't want to leave their house if they absolutely didn't have to. So I took care of my mom the way she took care of her mom. But my dad passed away at home. My mom passed away in the hospital after about a 6-week stint in the nursing home. But no one really wants to go into a nursing home. So sometimes it is reality.
It is. And just as a little anecdote about that, I had never heard my grandmother say a bad word, cuss, swear at all, until the day that my mother was explaining to her why she had to stay in a nursing home. And I heard a whole new side of Grandma, and Dad and I were sitting in there and
shocked.
Mom and Grandma were between us and getting out, and we were like,
yeah.
But it's understandable, and nobody was mad at her. It was just, it's a very tough thing.
It is, and I think, I can still to this day remember my mom looking at me, and I would go over and visit her every day in the nursing home, and she looked at me and she said, I just realized I'm never coming home, And the theory we put her in there for was to get stronger so she could walk again and then come back home, but she didn't have that drive to do that. But, aging parents, they don't want to be a burden on their kids, but they don't want to go into a nursing home either. So isn't that kind of an oxymoron? I don't want to be a burden, but I don't want to go in the nursing home. So what are you supposed to do with me?
It's a very tough thing, because I think a lot of people really would, if they had the time and work allowed, and medical ability and supplies allowed, would probably have their parents at home. But sometimes that's incredibly difficult, and sometimes it probably really is better to have some trained professionals on the case. It's a case-by-case basis. Everybody ages differently. There's a ton of things that happen as we age.
Well, and there's a lot of conversations that have to be made and had with our parents as they age. And a lot of times it's tough to bring up those conversations because you feel like you're prying into your mom and dad's finances or their personal life or their medical. But those conversations are important, and I think you have to, delve into those conversations in order to best be able to help them. So some of the conversations that you have about finances, medical issues, the final arrangements that they want, should they be living alone, and the medications they're taking. But there's a lot of these conversations that, they're hard to have with your loved ones because every conversation you have with them is like they're losing their independence a little more and a little more and a little more.
It's, I mentioned my parents, they're still very active. They've never really needed my help up until recently with some things. And I took my mom to an appointment, and she had to kind of go over her medical history. She has to answer, another episode for another day, but going to the hospital and having to answer the same set of questions to 6 or 7 different people that's a whole other thing. But you know, she was talking about some stuff, and she wasn't embarrassed, but she, you know, was clearly not aware that I already knew
Yeah.
all of those things,
Yeah.
and
Well,
wasn't embarrassed or shamed, just
mm-hmm.
was kind of hitting her like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I got all these things, and now my son's here to
No, to
take
witness
more of
I
a
have all
role,
this.
and
Yeah. It is hard because, you know, you really hate to think that at some point in time you're going to have to rely on your kids for help because you were always the parent, you were always the one taking care of them. And, you know, I look at it, I know I'm kind of different on this topic because I am an aging parent and I already, you know, have started making the plans because I already told my kids I'll pick out my nursing home and your job is to make sure the nursing home takes care of me because I will never expect my kids to do for me what I did for my mom. And, you know, my mom didn't want to move out to my house. And even though I had her favorite color carpet put in the bedroom and a door into the bathroom, she was afraid nobody would come and visit her out there. And I thought, well, okay, I can always buy another house, so I'll move in with my mom. And I did. And, you know, they had given her a couple weeks to live, and she lived a year and a half. And so there was a lot of things that, you know, transpired that I would never expect my kids to do it. You know, I did it for my mom. I loved her. That's what she wanted. But realistically, I remember her saying too, I thought I had everything under control. Well, we never planned to get sick. We never planned to get bedridden. We never plan a lot of times for things to happen to us. And we, you know, our wish is a lot of times just to go in our sleep so we don't have to be a burden to anybody. But, you know, the reality is that, you know, doesn't always happen.
And the tough thing about that is, you know, you mentioned, you know, lack of control. At all stages of our life, we're never in control of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you know, sadly, as you're aging, you start to lose control of yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
At certain times.
Yeah. You do. And there's only one person in control, and that's God. And, you know, we can ask Him to take us in our sleep and, you know, be with us as we have the challenges. But, you know, as a child of aging parents, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you around enough of them? Are you around them often enough that you can actually see changes within their household? Because if you're not around enough, you really don't know. I mean, I either visited my mom every day or I called her every day because I was on the road a lot. And, you know, when I went in once and I smelled something funny, well, she had turned the stove on and there was plastic lid in the oven, and that's what I was smelling, you know. Or you'd go in and you would find something in the microwave that she thought she put in and to eat and forgot she put it in there. And, you know, and until you're actually there enough, you really don't see a lot of things. Because when you talk to them on the phone, they sound good. They're going to tell you they're fine. They're going to tell you they don't need anything.
And if you're not there enough, you might see one instance of something like this and not think much of it. Because some of these things can honestly happen to anybody.
Right.
And it's really patterns and trends that you need to look out for in a lot of this stuff anyway. There are certain things that are red flags, and right away you see that thing one time, you got to move on it. But some of this stuff is frequency and trends and patterns.
Right. Because, you know, is there a wallet in the freezer or toilet paper in the fridge? You just never know. As your parents age, my dad, you know, he started Alzheimer's and dementia, and you would go over there and you would never know what decade he was in. Sometimes he would be under the table with my 2-year-old nephew, you know, playing, and you really never knew, you know, where he was. Was he in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s? But, you know, the other thing to look at too, you know, under the finances, are there past due bills that, you know, they forgot to pay. That's a good sign. My mom would, you know, say, oh, my checking account bounced, and then I'll know, you know, there's a problem because she, you know, overdrew her checking account. And that's not something that you want to see or have to go in and help fix that. So.
No, and that's that's a different case than, you know, somebody struggling economically. You know, that type of thing can happen once again, but you know, if you're around enough, you know, you don't necessarily know your parents' exact balance, but you know generally how they live and what they have and what they're doing. And, you know that if something like that happens to them, if you're around enough and you know, whether it's, you know, a I don't have enough money trouble or a I just forgot to
Right.
do this kind of trouble.
Right. So, but as you have those conversations with them and you talk to them about their finances, you know, you want to try to be an authorized signer on their account so that you can help pay their bills and help them do things financially to keep track of everything. But if both of your parents, you know, they're alive, so together they're going to try and look out for each other as long as they can. But eventually it comes time that, you know, one of them will fail faster and will not be able to have the strength or the ability to continue to take care of that loved one.
It's true.
So, you know, what happens then?
Well, you know, they're all sad. There's a lot of possibilities. You know, one could go into a nursing home, but that's not, you know, necessarily good to have somebody living alone. It depends on the person.
Right, you have to look at the situation as a whole.
Yep.
You know, maybe you have to have a caregiver that comes in and helps, you know,
Or,
take care.
You know, much like you did, a family member move in, or they both just decide to go to assisted living, you know, whereas one might not necessarily need it at the time, but
yeah, but they want to stay together, and you know, it's easy for them to adjust if they're together than to try and adjust, you know, by themselves. But, you know, before any of these things happen, you need to have those tough conversations with them. Because after these things start happening, it's the wrong time to start having the conversations. Because by the time these things start happening, the wheel's about to fall off the car and you're going to be, you know, skidding down a rough road. You can't help your aging parents if you don't understand their full situation, you know, medically, financially, all of it is a ball of help, you know, if they have to want you to. You know, one of the hardest things I find is people call me after the fact. You know, they don't have their paperwork in order and then they need help, and there's only so much you can do if you don't have the paperwork in order to help them. So everything, you know, really needs to be set up.
Yep, and a lot of this, you know, we talked about during the estate planning episode.
It is, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to carry this aging parents forward, because some of this, you know, you want to make sure is taken care of even before you get to that estate planning or as part of the estate planning that we talked about.
So, for instance, some of the things that you do need to set up, are you on the HIPAA forms at the doctor's office so you can find out how they're doing medically? Are you the healthcare power of attorney? Is there a living will to ensure that you know, their wishes are followed?
Are you a signer on any of their bank accounts so that you can help them pay their bills? Do you have a general power of attorney so that you can act on their behalf no matter what the issue is?
You know, do you need to have a medical alert system? Do we need to have that button whose brand name I won't say because possible copyright issues? I doubt those people would come after us, but you never know. But, you know, do you need something like that? And, you know, there's one popular brand of it, but there's all
there's
all manner
brands,
and ways and buttons and different things you can do, and a lot of things you can do with phones nowadays as well.
Yeah, but it's better to be proactive instead of reactive. A lot of times when you're reacting to a situation, you miss something, and you don't have all your, you know, T's crossed and your I's dotted, and something falls by the wayside.
Absolutely.
But here's one of the things too: is let's face it, as aging parents, we are getting older, and that doesn't mean that we're dead yet, because we're not. But we need to be realistic, and we say we don't want to be a burden to our kids. Well, if we don't want to be a burden to our kids and our family, then we need to be responsible, and we need to take care of everything that needs to be taken care of that will help our kids, so they don't get put in a situation and have to make decisions that we aren't going to be happy with.
And, you know, and on the other end of that, you know, when you're the son or daughter to the aging parents, you need to approach it with, you know, gentleness and respect, and because this is not, oh, you've got a problem that we need to fix and we need to do this. It's just it's got to be two adults dealing with reality.
Right. And it's like, mom and dad, can we sit down and look at something so that we know everything is good now, but we never know what's going to happen. You could get in a car accident tomorrow, and we just need to make sure everything is prepared. But as the kids, you can also project future needs if you evaluate their living conditions. That's something, you can do a mental check when you're at their house and kind of, look for things like, are they living on a one floor, apartment or a ranch house, or, what are their living conditions? And I know I have looked at that myself because there are 16 steps up to my unit. So I know I'm either going to have to move or I'm going to have to put a lift in as I get older to take me up to my level. So, I've already started doing cost-effective research and trying to decide which is going to be the best. But, when you're looking at it, you need to look at, how do they get into their house? Do they have steps? Do they have a ramp?
And, their living situation, it's important because there's no way we could ever list everything out here. But your mom and dad, your parents. Mm-hmm. And when something's changed, when it's not right. One thing that's never going to be right, though, if you are visiting your parents, before or after daylight savings changes, those clocks are never going to be right. That's just, people are legally obligated. The clocks are just going to be wrong, so don't ever think that one's going to...
Yeah, you just need to go over and volunteer change the ball for them.
You just do that one. That one's just going to happen.
Yeah, so... But you can look at it, are they things that they're going to need on down the road? Like grab bars, are they going to need a shower seat? Are they going to need, a shower head they can do by hand? I mean, we did a clean out up in Bellevue last week, and there was a brand new shower bar in a box, and it's like, I kept it because you never know, somebody might need it. If it's not me, it's somebody else.
And the one thing I want to touch on with some of this stuff is, we're listing off a number of different supplies here, shower bars and seats. Much of the stuff really isn't very expensive. There are ways to get,
Right. There are, and you can watch, look at the sales and stuff, but a lot of seniors don't want them in their house because they think if they're in their house, that means they're getting old and they're not going to need it. And it's like, you know what, I would rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And, the two biggest issues, and I know with my mom, was, having the grab bars to help her get off of the commode and to having the bar in the shower because she had a tub she had to step over. So she needed a bar on the tub, to step over. And she had, two steps to get into her house. So she needed a grab bar to help her get into her house. But, just because you have these things doesn't mean that you are giving in to age or to your abilities. It's being proactive instead of, reactive, because when you're in a hospital situation and, visiting nurse comes out because now you're getting ready to come home and you don't have all this stuff, then everybody is scrambling to put it in. And, I remember my mom fell, she fell at her house and, my brothers had to come over and put the grab bars in. They had to get everything, in line for her to be able to come home. So if you're already, thinking that way and looking that way, and you know what, putting up grab bars and stuff really does not deter from the value of your house. A lot of people appreciate it being there, and if somebody wants to get it out later on the road, they can remove it and do whatever, but most of the time they don't.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff gets put up with, not really damaging the walls or anything, little patches here and there.
Yeah.
And the type of stuff you might be doing to your house anyway when you bought it, with painting and patching and all those different things.
Yeah. So, what is their current health, and you have to be honest about it, because, a lot of times your parents don't like to tell you how bad they are, or they're just going to tough it out, and they don't want, to disturb your family or, anything that's going on in your household. So a lot of times they don't say things, and that's why it's important that you go to the doctor with them on a regular basis and you visit your parents on a regular basis, because if you don't, you really have no idea what's going on. If I didn't call my mom every day and she didn't answer the phone by so many rings, and I didn't call back or she didn't answer right away, I knew there was an issue. And, I was at out of town one time calling. She didn't answer. I called again. She didn't answer. And so I had to call my brother and my daughter and say, go over to my mom's and check and see what's going on with grandma. And when they got there, she was laying on the floor in her bedroom and she couldn't get herself back up. And so if you don't, err on the side of caution and you have a routine with your parents, you're not going to know anything is out of place. So you need to make sure that you do that. And, so visiting regularly and talking to them regularly is, really important as your parents age.
Absolutely.
And let's face it, no one likes to get old. Unfortunately, it is a fact of life.
We're all at different stages of life, but every time I get this thick head of haircut, there is more gray every time. And this
from being a parent.
and this last time I looked at it, I'm like, where is all the stuff that's not gray here? But it's we're all just at different stages, but it's we all age. That's
yeah, we do.
I said a lot of words to get there.
Yeah. Well, there are different options that you need to look at, and there are several senior communities where you could live independently. And they have a step down or step up progress or process, and it's one of those that you go in and you live independently, and then as your needs change, then you can go into assisted living, and as your needs change further, then you can go into the nursing facility and have full care. And those are great opportunities if you have the financial means and you can do that, but they're definitely something worth checking into. There are senior housing developments that a lot of seniors live in, and they're usually 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And they are usually income driven, so their rent is sometimes subsidized by the government if you qualify. You have to really be careful going into a senior high rise. Several people I know that have gone into a senior high rise have run into the bed bug problem. And bed bugs travel. And, my one friend had bed bugs 2 or 3 times, and she got them from a neighbor across the hall. They treated. But you need to read your lease agreement very well.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes in that lease it says bed bugs are not a reason to break the lease. And I don't know about you, but I don't want any bed bug issues. And it saddens me that seniors have to put up with something like that.
It's a silly thing to think that. It just seems ridiculous for that to be wording in a lease, but that's why you have to read it. The other thing is we were talking about high rises that I just thought about is if you're somebody who has trouble walking, knee trouble, hip trouble, whatever it might be, you live on the top level of that thing and there's a fire emergency, elevators are usually off.
That's right.
During those kind of scenarios. So how are you going to get...
Right.
It's something to think about. It may or may not be an issue. Some of these buildings may have ways of dealing with that, but... Yeah,
and you have to think about all of that. The same friend that had the bed bugs, she lived in a unit, and their air conditioning was out for months. The elevators went out 2 or 3 times. When the elevators are out, these are the elderly with walkers and canes, and they have to go up and down the steps. So those are things when you're looking at a senior high-rise. Read the comments that are on Google. Talk to some of the other occupants. Ask about their maintenance schedule. Ask when the last time the air conditioning was serviced. Ask how many times an elevator broke down in the last 6 months. Ask the things that you want to know, because once you move in, it's too late. And a lot of times they will also show you the best unit that they have that's available. But when you move in, it's not the best unit. Somebody else I know moved into a senior high-rise this summer. Moved in, wasn't even there a day, and his ceiling and everything started leaking. There was a broken pipe, and it took, he moved in, I think it was on a Friday, and he had to go all weekend, and they were emptying buckets every 45 minutes. Thankfully, they finally did fix it. But these are issues that seniors really should not have to be dealing with. And unfortunately, today there are a lot of slumlords out there who just want to rake in all the income they can from them, and they do not want to do the maintenance. So it's very important that you check and see who the owner of the building is. See if it is an LLC. See if they're out of state. See when they purchased it recently. And also, I would check with the city and see if they've been cited for any complaints, because as a kid of a parent or a loved one, you have to look out for them, but you have to read everything.
Read
Because
everything, look at the facility, do
Yeah,
do your
do
homework.
your due diligence, because once they're in, it's terrible. And also, these senior high rises are terrible at giving back your security deposits. My friend passed away, and I tried to get our security deposit back for part of the estate, never got it back. I sent my demand letters, I went through probate, I went through everything, and unfortunately, this is one of the slumlord owners, never got that security deposit back. We cleaned the unit, we cleaned the carpet, and we did everything to make sure it was nice, and and that's terrible. So you also need to make sure that that is not a case for you. So do your homework, do your due diligence, and look at everything and make sure you evaluate. Read the lease. The thing that gets me about contracts and leases is people don't want to take the time to read them when they're there to sign them. And what I would do is, to take away that issue, is ask for a blank lease ahead of time. Tell them that you want to read it over, and if you're interested, then you'll come back and schedule an appointment to sign it. But or say you want to have your attorney look at it, and if they squawk about having you look at your attorney look at it, then you don't want to be there.
That's probably not the right.
Yeah, it's probably not the right place for you. Even though, like I said, no matter how sharp you are mentally, two heads are better than one, so you always want to take somebody else with you.
Yes, absolutely. Whether it's kids or a trusted friend or advisor or attorney, anybody.
Right. Yeah, because if you go in and you sign it and then you call somebody for help, like I get those calls sometimes, it's too late. You've already signed it, and then it becomes a contract, and then then you're going to have to go to an attorney, because you're going to need contract law assistance. So, but if you are experiencing shortfalls, what can be done?
And this is, you gotta, as you do in any stage of life, evaluate your monthly income versus your expenses, at least annually, if not more.
Right. And if you are in one of the senior high rises that has subsidized income, every year you are going to have to reapply for that subsidy. So, because they're always going to check and make sure that you still qualify for that assistance. So plan on that annually, if you are living in a senior high rise.
And if you need help with that, get help. Have your, if you're, get help if you need help.
Yeah.
Speaking from my generation, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it kind of goes with anything. If you need help, ask for it.
Yeah, and don't be embarrassed to ask for help. Everybody needs help. I need help. Everybody needs help,
Yes.
at some point in time. And it's better. It goes back to, people think that the question, they don't want to ask a question because it's dumb, but there is no dumb question.
Absolutely
and we talked about that. But as you age, you and your kids, we need to work together so that everybody is on the same page and everybody understands what's going on. I know my kids think I'm funny because I try to keep them in the loop. Every time I do something, I let them both know what I did. So, when I went to the doctor recently, I put both my kids, and this was a new doctor, on my, information sheet that they can call and talk to the doctor about me. And so I want them to know, because I don't want them to get into a situation where they don't have what they need to take care of things. So there are several different types of resources that are available for seniors to reach out to. And one of them that is a good one is your local area on aging. They have a lot of programs available, and they are a good resource. There's other things that you might qualify for.
Rent assistance, free internet, free phone, reduced utilities, supplemental Social Security income, food stamps. Veterans have another set of benefits.
Right.
And that's probably not even scratching the surface of what might be available in your area.
Right. And so ask for help. A lot of seniors are on fixed income. They're at the point in life where they can't work anymore. They can't do anything for extra income. And, there's programs out there that are there to help you. But there is a aging parents checklist that we put together, and it's also online that you can take a look at too if you search aging parents. So we're going to go over that kind of quick. But the first one is, I think is important, is clarifying with your family what the caregiving roles are, especially if there's more than one child. Each child should have its role, whether it should never fall on one person ever. If there's more than one person can maybe get their groceries if they can't get out, or they can set them up on, buying their groceries online and having them delivered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another person might, make sure they're getting Meals on Wheels and that they're getting food. Another person might be in charge of their medical and going to the doctor with them. When you have two parents that are still driving, you have that opportunity. But what's going to happen when you have to have that conversation that, they can't drive anymore?
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
It's a very tough one.
It is.
That's why, we keep talking about being proactive and having these conversations early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with my dad, I remember he had dementia and Alzheimer's, and, he was never thought he should never drive. He should always drive. He never was going to give up his driver's license. And the only thing that got me to convince him that it was time to give up his driver's license was I told him, I said, Dad, how would you feel if you drove and you hit a child? Because it's very possible. And it was that thought of hurting a child that made him realize that he shouldn't be driving anymore. And so you really have to look at that. And then he agreed to let me go get him a state ID, along with, him being able to know who he was and, where he lived. It was a very tough conversation with him, because in his mind, he was still okay, even though he wasn't. But, putting that plan together and sticking to it is one of the main things that you really have to do.
Another thing, your parents might have pets. Got to decide what to do with them if a change needs to be made.
Yeah, are you going to find that pet a good home, or if the parents get to go somewhere that's pet friendly? Because pets will be a big issue with mom and dad if they're tied to their pets.
The various care options we've talked about, senior communities, the high rises. You have to explore those options, and it's going to depend on finances, but you need to look at all that. So whatever financial level you might be at,
right,
you need to do your due diligence in that area for sure.
You sure do. You need to look at insurance. What kind of insurance do they have? Their retirement plans, their benefits, long-term insurance. You need to make sure you know where all their paperwork is, their important documents, so that you know where to go, and to see if any type of adjustments need to be made. And that's in going with them to the doctor to see maybe there is something new that has to happen at home when they come home this time from the doctor, and making sure that you're going there.
Another one, as we're taking care of aging parents, doesn't just affect them, it can affect you and your work and the time you might need to spend. So you need to take a look at your job and, is there going to be a time where you need to take some Family Medical and Leave Act leave time as you're caring for certain things.
Yeah, because typically that you can get up to 12 weeks, and is that something that you might have to do?
And there's preparation too, because some parts of that leave, I believe it's unpaid in most cases. So
yes, it is.
You're depending on where you work, you might have some different leave programs and some different options, but just that federal, government Family Medical and Leave Act is unpaid. Secures your job, which is great, but you have to figure out what to do for 12 weeks yourself too.
Yeah, you do. And then, sometimes you have to look at, I believe the Veterans Benefits will pay for a caregiver up to a certain amount per, week. So that's one of the things you also need to look at. How are you going to subsidize your income if you have to do that? And maybe realistically, you won't be able to do that. So you're going to have to do, another solution that's going to be best for your mom and dad.
Absolutely.
So,
but kind of on this same line of thought with finances, there are federal tax breaks and deductions that may be available
right.
For healthcare costs, acquiring a hospital bed, wheelchair, part-time or full-time home health aides, out-of-pocket expenses that aren't covered by insurance, remodeling to make the home accessible. There may be tax breaks or deductions for those things and more.
Right. And you need to look at that because those are all expenses out of pocket. And if you can get some type of credit for it, you need to look at that when it comes time to filing your taxes.
Yep. And another item, right along with medical, roll right into monitoring medications. And this is more difficult than it should be because depending on, what's going on, what the health situation is, there may be a ridiculous amount of pills those aging parents have to take. They may have to take a certain one in the morning and then at lunch and then at and I've seen pill cases that look like tiny little boxes and sheets. It looks like a sheet of graph paper basically. And you're supposed to try to figure out, and it can be hard for anybody to figure out what's supposed to go in what box, and obviously making sure the right ones are in there, but then that they're getting handled the right way.
When my brother lived with me before he passed away, I would get the little snack bag sandwiches and I would put his pills in, and I would put morning, AM, afternoon, or if there was a time to kind of help him regulate his pills. So when he didn't take them and I knew what was left, then I knew, that something wasn't taken that day. But that was the only way I could, make sure that I knew he was getting his medication. And so it is tough because there are so many to take care of. And if you don't have that person that's watching your pills, it's one of those that, sometimes I'll have breakfast and by noon I'll forget what I had for breakfast. So it's that easy too to also forget your pills. And, people will do things that try to help them remember. And I do this myself. I don't take a lot of medication. I take multivitamins and I take a elderberry supplement. So when I have those 2 bottles on my counter, if I take the vitamins, I'll set it, away, and that leaves that bottle out. So I know I haven't taken it for that day. But you just have to kind of get yourself into a mindset with checks and balances to make sure yourself that you are taking what you need as well.
Yep. Another financial topic, we talked about it before, probably don't need to sit on this one a lot, but become an authorized user on your parents' accounts. You can't help with the money. You can't help with their money if you don't have the authority to help with their money.
Right, and that's even calling credit cards if there's an error or, a fraud on their account and you want to call and talk to them. They're not going to talk to you unless they have the approval to do so. And that goes for any and every account that you have, whether it's a bank account, a loan, a car note, anything. You have to have in writing that, you are allowed to talk to this person. And so it goes back to, we can't help you if you don't have all the paperwork in order.
Yep. And, kind of, that's an important thing. And there's a lot of documents that we don't think a lot about that are critically important. And you need to make sure, these are in order and that you have access to these. You said before, it's too late. Birth certificates, deeds to cemetery plots, divorce decrees, insurance policies, marriage certificates, pension benefit paperwork, military discharge papers, advanced directions, healthcare, power of attorney, living will, all these things. A lot of the stuff we talked about in estate planning. But we did touch on things like the birth certificate. You're gonna need all this. There's probably more here we could think of too.
Yeah, you are. But the key, I think, in this is it has to be in one location.
Yes.
See, I don't have all mine in one location, so I give my kids a general idea. It's on this desk, in this pile, in this box, because part of me says if I put it all in one location and somebody breaks in, it's all together. And I don't want it stolen, so I try to be organized, but I also know I have everything done, but I am the only person that really knows where it is. And so I try to keep them up and, say, hey, this is here, hey, this is there. And they tell me, well, put a list together. And it's like, well, if I die before I get that list together, they're going on a paper hunt a little bit. It's not so bad, but they are going to have to.
This is real though. She's asked me to come over and work on a computer, and the password is on a little post-it, by the second desk under the thing with the.
Yeah.
It does happen, folks.
Yeah. Well. But you also need to talk to your parents about really what their values are and what their wishes are. Because if you wait till they have dementia or Alzheimer's, it's really too late. And other illnesses could set in. It's not a conversation that you always like to have, but I never had that with my dad. Or really my mom about what they wanted and how they wanted their final arrangements to be. Other than I knew they never wanted to go into a nursing home. They kind of left everything else up to me. But it is one of those conversations that you do want to have. You need to ask questions like, how do you really want to be remembered?
And that, that's one that it's not touching how you live. It's not necessarily touching finances, but it's important for a person to,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I'll say most people, I can't speak for everybody, but most people want to have some kind of legacy and want to be remembered for something or that they were something. And that's not a selfish thing to think about yourself, by the way. You're allowed to want those things.
Yeah, and it's like, what do you want your epitaph to be? What do you want on your tombstone?
Well, it's not going to be what she almost made me say on the estate planning episode.
And it's not going to say, hey, I fell and I can't get up. But you do need to think about that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and you need to ask them too, what's the most important thing to you if you can't do what you love to do anymore, or you can't take care of yourself? If you think about that, you think, how would I answer that question? Well, I would want to hear music. I would want, if I couldn't take care of myself and, I couldn't do the things that I really love to do physically, then I would want to be filled mentally or spiritually.
Yep.
So I think are there certain shows? I mean, my dad loved Westerns. He would watch Westerns all day long. And my mom liked faith-based, and she liked to listen to Christian radio. But those are things that, what would your mom and dad like? You'd have to ask them and really see. If you do have a life-threatening illness, and this is covered in the living will,
yep.
Right. How do you want to be taken care of? Do you, want your medical care to take care of me no matter what and keep me alive because I just may one day come out of that coma, or God may do a miracle and I just want to be that one. So what do you want?
And what are your fears about getting old? We have this at all stages of life, but something you want to work out with your parents before they can't communicate that to you anymore. I certainly wouldn't want my parents to be in a situation where, they had some fear and I had arranged something just not in the best way possible to address it. I mean, I suppose you could never do some of this stuff perfectly, but you can't do your best if you don't know.
That's right. You can't. And as people age and different medications has different effects on them, sometimes they do have hallucinations, or sometimes they get things in their mind, especially when they're in the hospital. They're afraid to complain in the hospital because they're afraid they're not going to get taken care of. That's a very legitimate fear that a lot of seniors have. They have a fear of being alone, and and so you have to look at, how can you not be alone? How can you help them not be alone? And I made a comment to my son that I know there's a business we should go into. We should start this line where seniors can call and talk to anybody any day or night. Well, it already exists, and so, setting them up with something that they know they can call and talk to somebody any time of the day or night about anything that they want. And they can set that up. So you have to look at how can you alleviate, some of the fears. So
we've talked about it, but you want to have the financial arrangements. What does that look like, and just the overall. What does that what does a good end look like to you if you're, the aging parent or aging person, or, what does that look like for whoever you're taking care of? Is it a hospital? Is it hospice? Is it a nursing facility? Because to the best of the ability, these things are so tough because somebody might have one look at it and you may know that that's just not the best thing for that person, and but that's why you want to be proactive, so you can have that discussion or argument or whatever it might be before you can't even have the argument about it anymore.
Yeah, and it's like I told my kids on my final arrangements, it's like I'm trying to take care of everything because I know my kids will be a basket case and it'll be hard for them to do it. And so I feel like the more that I take care of and handle that, the easier it will be for them. And it's like my aunt, she's always wanted to be cremated and have her ashes thrown, in Lake Ann. And, forever she has said that. And so if you don't, make sure that what you want is verbalized or in writing, then you're going to get potluck and you're just going to have to roll over in your grave or whatever.
Yeah.
And,
a lot of this stuff we're talking about on the checklist too, when we talked about estate planning, a lot of this is covered under that as well. So a lot of the documents you need to get ready. We're saying some of these things in multiple places, we're repeating a bit, but that's, just get on something.
Yeah, you have to do something. You have to take action.
But the good news is if you do, a will, you're taking care of kind of X, Y, and Z and a couple of these things. Kind of on the checklist though has to be, we've talked about it a little bit, safety, with the grab bars and, bars in the home to help people get ramps, steps, lifts, rugs. But does somebody need a GPS bracelet? Is somebody going to wander off, or a camera for monitoring, or a camera to see if somebody fell? In those situations where you can't get in contact with somebody. Right.
My dad wandered off, and my daughter was watching her, and she calls me and she says, "I lost Grandpa." And he wanted to go down to the boulevard and get some tobacco, and she wouldn't take him, so he took off walking. And so she called me, and I said, he wouldn't have gone far, and as he started walking, he would forget, what he was going for. I said, so drive around the block, and you should find him walking. And I said, and when you do, just say, "Hey, Grandpa, do you want to ride?" And she did, and she found him. But that's a time in a situation where we had to start putting his name and address in his clothes because, GPSs and bracelets and monitors weren't around at that time.
Yeah, well, and if you don't have it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, GPS and camera this and camera that, but there are still ways and means of doing that, like you just said.
Right.
Just making sure somebody has their name and address on them, whether it's...
Yeah, because he wandered off another time, and the guy happened to know him because they talked about gardens, and he brought him back home. And, and no matter how much you think you have, close watch on him, you could be in the bathroom and he's gone. So it is a very realistic situation. But, ARP is a great resource for seniors and kids. And, if you're not a member of ARP, and we don't get reimbursed or any type of money for anything that we recommend, it's things that we have used and we are aware of. But they are a great resource for seniors on so many levels.
And a lot of that stuff, AARP, some of the other, Ohio has Golden Buckeye still, that's still a thing. So whatever your state is, wherever your area is, you're no doubt going to get spammed with this mail when you get anywhere near that age. So, day and age of internet is easy to look up, but some of this stuff truly is kind of hard to miss, and AARP is hard to miss. I'm 39 years old. I'm getting that paperwork addressed to me, not addressed to the previous owner of the house. Do I get that too? I still get that too.
Yeah.
So some of this you're not going to miss, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's good to get spammed in some of those situations because you're going to see that and you're going to take care of some stuff, and as you take care of that thing that you got spammed about, that might remind you of another thing, and you call to talk to that person about the thing, and you think of something else. So this is all good. Yeah.
Well, I want to read a couple Bible verses before we finish up and wrap up a few things. Ephesians chapter 6 verses 2 and 3 says, Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, and that it may go well with you, and that may every joy long as you live a long life on earth. That's one of the things, and that is in 3 different areas in the Bible under 3 different scriptures. And so I always feel like when he's trying to tell us something, he tells us multiple times so that it kind of gets ingrained in our brain. But in Leviticus 19:32, it says, "Rise in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God. I am the Lord." And it says, 1 Timothy 5:8, "If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." And I think, oh man, that's not something you really want to mess with. And
No.
you don't think about that being such a severe item, but it really is. But Job 12:12 says, "Wisdom belongs to the aged, and understanding to the old." And Proverbs 16:31 is, "Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness." So, think about it. We have earned the gray hair. We have earned the respect and a lot of things as we have gotten older, and we have lived a lot of years. And so part of even doing this show is to share a lot of the issues and challenges that we have lived through, and to try and help you maybe to have a little easier road than what we had. So now, growing old is no fun, but growing old is going to be about what you make it.
Yeah, so the type of thing you might say to anybody who's lonely or worried about something, but especially at this stage of life, get involved with hobby groups. At the end of the day, we are responsible for our own happiness. So
Right.
there are hobby groups, and depending on where you live, they may have groups. My parents have a bunch of different stuff where they're at senior center groups, church groups. There's hardly an age you can be also where you can't just go and volunteer for something.
Oh, yeah. Even the area on aging has a grandparents program for older people that can volunteer and become pseudo grandparents for elementary school kids and different kids that don't have the luxury of having grandparents. So stay active and involved as long as you can.
And that can change, right? Because physically and mentally there will be certain things that we just can't do, and it
Right.
changes at stages of life.
Right.
I'm not physically able to go play in the NFL. If I could, I would have signed that $65 million contract by
Yeah.
now, but it changes as you age. So
Right.
a lot of this is just about doing the best that you can for where you're at. No
Right.
one's saying what's the expression, no one's saying punch above your pay grade.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or weight class. Oh, I messed that up, didn't I?
I don't
said
know.
I said punch above your pay grade.
But it says also get your family involved in your
Absolutely.
aging plans.
Yeah.
Make decisions with them, and grow old gracefully with God. There's one last verse that I would like to read, and that is 2 Thessalonians 3:16. It says, "Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way, and the Lord will be peace be with you always." And I think that kind of wraps up our aging parents, Greg.
Yeah, you being only 25 years old, I'm not sure what you know about any of this, but
Oh, yeah. I am an aging parent. I am an aging in-law. I'm aging problems. I already know.
how many episodes we've had at this point? If there was going to be a problem with son-in-law and mother-in-law, I think we would have had it by now. So I think we're all good here, everybody.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time.
Absolutely. See ya.